Meagan Fettes is known as the Joy Coach, and for over 15 years, she has taught and coached others how to live from a heart space and utilize the skills of visualization and manifestation to create the life they desire. And she is on with me today to talk about how we form our body image. Welcome on in, Meagan. Yay!
How are you guys?
We're good. We're good. We're good. So, let's recap last week a little bit. We kind of gave a broad stroke overview of body image, what it is, and just summarize for us real quick. What do you think one of the big things that we need to know about body image, Meagan?
One of the biggest things when it comes to body image is the disconnection of the mind and the body. So living more so in the story realm, I call it. Stories that we create based upon belief systems, on past-based experiences, and then we actually pull out of our physical body and our true reality of our image, our true image.
All right. So today we're going to talk about how the body image forms. Where does it start early? How early does it start?
Yeah, usually we learn all of our belief systems before the age of 7. So we actually formulate our body image usually from about the age 4 until highest about 8 years old.
So those are very challenging times then.
Yeah, in the yoga world, that's when we talk about the creation of the ego. Yeah, the formation of the ego is right at that stage of 4 to 8 years old. So that's usually when we start looking externally. We start trying to figure out where we fit, how we fit into the world, what that actually looks like, and build our belief systems based upon the reactions that we have from usually more so our parents, but anyone close to us.
Yeah, my daughter is about to turn 3 next month. And I can see how she's really trying to test her boundaries, her limits, and I see that formation of her ego. And I know this is not a parenting session, but what should I be looking out for and try to avoid or help her out?
Well, one of the biggest things to acknowledge, like as a parent, I know my kids are right at that development stage as well. My oldest will be 5 in a couple months here, my youngest 3 as well soon. And as a parent, it's really important to remember that no matter what we do, they're going to form an ego. We can't stop that, but we can give them the tools to look and perceive things differently. So, for example, they'll start voicing it a little bit more about what their belief systems are about themselves, how they feel about certain situations. And as a parent, what's really important is to sit there and encourage that they look at things from a different point of view. So that they can see it from all angles and have that point of curiosity.
Yeah, it's always a balancing act for me and my partner, Erica, who, when we get around like grandmothers and aunts, and they don't, subscribe to our the way we like to parent, we like to allow my daughter Mason to kind of be what she wants to be. And it turns out she's a very girly girl. She likes to wear dresses and totally nothing that she's naturally just drawn to pink, and I don't prescribe to stereotypes like that. My first older daughter went through a phase around when she was 8 years old where she went from being a girly girl to not very girly at all. She turned into a tomboy, sweatpants, sneakers, and now she's going back to girly girl again. So it always seems to be a balance between guiding your child versus like forcing your stereotypes on them.
Yeah, and usually what happens is we're not even aware when we're doing it too. Like as parents, we'll just naturally say things or verbalize some of our belief systems, or even sometimes when we're stressed, when we kind of just speak without intention. They're little sponges, right? They're hearing things. And the other thing to acknowledge is they're also watching how we treat ourselves.
I like that.
As parents. So it might not even necessarily be anything that we say, but how we're acting and how we're treating ourselves. And then they base their opinion about themselves on that.
So if they see their mom stressed out after work, or
Mhm.
how their mom and dad communicate, how do they internalize that? What do they do exactly?
Well, they'll start to develop their sense of worth.
Mm,
So, and we learn like 50-50 from mother and father and how our worth is, what our story is about ourselves.
hmm
So we actually learn how to love and how to nurture ourselves from our mother. And we learn our value, our worth from our father.
hmm Now, what if you don't have a traditional household, because like in the modern world, though, the nuclear family isn't like the Beaver Cleaver family of yesteryear. You have broken families, you have divorced families, you've got, single moms, single dads. What happens in that case?
Usually the child will find somebody, like there's always going to be somebody that emulates those kinds of properties for them that they'll
Mm,
start to watch and they'll start to utilize that to base their worth on.
mm,
So it may not necessarily be a dad or a traditional mom. It may just be the qualities that the individuals in their lives
mm.
represent. So there's still the dual qualities that come in that
And
development.
and what about peers? Because around 7 years old, you're in first, second, third grade, right? Around that time period, kindergarten. And they're obviously picking up some clues from their peers, aren't they?
Yes, absolutely. So when we get to that age of 7, that's when we begin to really test out those belief systems.
Hmm
In psychology, we kind of talk a little bit about the self-fulfilling prophecy.
Mm,
And so where that really comes into importance is at that age, kids, we all start to look outside of ourselves to see if the belief systems that we've generated are true. And usually, what we'll do is we'll surround ourselves with peers that will bring out that belief system because it's that self fulfilling prophecy.
So we want to hang out with people who confirm our belief system, basically, you're saying.
Basically, is yes, what we're doing.
So that's why a lot of times girly girls hang out with girly girls, and the tomboy girl hangs out with more of her boy guy friends, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's give my viewers, who are mostly women, some tips, right? So you're a yoga instructor. So
hmm
is yoga useful for young kids?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yoga is one of my favorite things to teach to kids. In
Hmm
fact, actually, my almost 5 year old, he'll sit in meditation with me every
Mm.
single morning
Oh, wow.
and will do yoga with me every single day.
Okay, let me stop you there. So how do you get a 5-year-old to meditate? What do you do?
So it started off with him sitting on my lap,
Hmm
and I would just get him to notice my breath. So I'd be really intentional with how deep I'd breathe
Show
so
us
that he could feel it.
like that, or
Yeah, so you want your belly and your chest to expand with the breath,
hmm okay.
just like that. And then they will start to match their breath with yours.
hmm
And with kids, never do longer than their age for
hmm
seated meditation.
What do you mean? Like if they're
Just,
5 years old, don't make them do more than 5 minutes?
yeah,
It's like timeout.
it is kind of like timeout. That's usually the amount of time that they have like their attention span for, right? So
Right.
anything past that, it's just wasted space for them.
Correct. Correct. I see that a lot where parents either put their kids in timeout for too long, or the same thing like you're saying, they're wanting them to sit still for too long. They can't do it.
hmm
Hmm
Yeah.
So
The
how would
other trick,
go,
I'll
go
share one more trick because
go
I
ahead.
love teaching about meditation. Um, Rocks. You
Yep.
know, it's so interesting to me. Kids love rocks.
hmm
It's like very rare I've ever found a kid that's not amazed by rocks. So if you have them hold a rock while they're meditating, it will help ground them as
hmm
well.
Yeah, Thich Nhat Hanh teaches that. He calls it pebble meditation, and we shift
Cool.
rock from one hand to the next, and the kid just basically sits there and focuses on shifting the rock from one hand to the next.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I find that really helps with kids who are hyperactive, you know.
Yes. Yeah, because every single kid at any age can sit still. It's just how you support them when they're in it, right? And
Mm-hmm.
just that, if they're high energy and they've got maybe ADD or ADHD
Mm-hmm.
and they're kind of spinning, they really need that stillness, that space.
Mm-hmm.
But it's giving them those tools that will help to slow them down,
So how
focus.
so how does meditation and yoga help with forming the body image that we're talking about?
Hmm. Well, one of the big ways that it helps is, again, it bridges that gap between the mind and the body. Because
Mm-hmm.
more often than not, when we're busy, when we're just doing and going through life, we're not
Mm-hmm.
actually connecting to our physical body.
Mm-hmm.
We're in our thoughts, we're in our mind. So when we take that step back and begin to create stillness through meditation, through breath, through
Mm-hmm.
yoga, we have that opportunity to notice, how is our body responding to our breath?
Mm-hmm.
How does our body feel? And to stimulate the curiosity around the sensations in the physical body versus judgment of what we're
Mm-hmm.
experiencing.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to bring this conversation back to the adults here at the end, but I want to walk through how we form our body image. So let's fast
Yeah.
forward a few years because it seems like you get into junior high and then high school and the shit kind of hits the fan, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I can only talk about the boy pressures, because as a freshman in high school, a skinny little nerdy Asian boy, I felt a lot of pressure to try to fit in, and I was having all these changes happening to my body and all that sort of stuff. But tell us a little bit about some of the pressures young girls go through during that time period.
Yeah. So it's very much, and I mean, it's different even now compared to like when I grew up.
Hmm.
But because of what is the expectation of the
Hmm.
body, what we deem to be the healthy body,
Hmm.
there's the idea of trying to fit into that. So there's a lot of extra pressures around how much you're eating, what you're eating, movement, all of that.
Curves,
Curves, yeah,
curves, shapes, menstrual
yeah.
cycles. A lot of them are starting their menstrual cycles.
Yes, and the hormonal changes too that go along with it, right?
Hmm.
Definitely a lot of shifts and changes happening at that time. And
Hmm.
really, I think what it is feeling like there's a lack of control
Hmm.
because there's so much going on internally and so many changes going
Hmm.
on that really, I think the most challenging aspect around the body image, around ourselves, is feeling like we don't have control over it in that time.
Mm, yeah, yeah. So, um, let's talk about obesity then. So, around that time period, you're also socializing a lot, trying to find friends, hanging out. And I noticed that from my work that a lot of my patients that's usually around the time they're starting to gain weight. Why do you think
Mm-hmm.
that is?
Dealing with emotions.
Mm-hmm.
So, when I talk about connecting to the physical body, one of the big reasons that we disconnect from the physical body is out of discomfort from emotions.
Mm,
So, we actually feel our emotions in our bodies. That's why we call them feelings, because
mm,
we'll feel them and experience them. And sometimes they're unpleasant, right? Sometimes it feels tight or heavy, or sometimes it feels really light. But we begin to pull away from having to experience and deal with those emotions, and instead
mm,
we'll stuff them down. And so sometimes that comes with food.
mm-hmm,
So we'll stuff it utilizing food, or we'll create a self-punishment
mm.
in not eating any food
Well,
as well.
yeah, I feel like food is easy because it's everywhere and it's socially acceptable, right? And it's gotten cheaper and cheaper, so it's nothing for you to ask your mom and dad to buy some cookies or snack cakes or stuff anymore, right? It seems like a
Mhm.
nice, cheap, affordable treat, but it actually ends up being more of a punishment.
Yes, and it's one of those things of really, and especially as a parent, something that I'm really intentional with is there's also a lot of the old paradigms of like, well, you have to eat your whole plate
Hmm.
of food before you can have something else, or like constantly focusing on food, making sure that the individual child is full instead of encouraging them to listen to their own body,
Hmm.
their own
Yeah.
needs. And so I think when we get into that adolescent, like teen years, it gets really confusing, because now all of a sudden there's a little bit more of a intention. Like, what are you eating? How much are you eating? How are you supporting
Yeah.
yourself?
I agree with that because I have the same problem with my daughter's grandmom and great grandmoms, and they want to try to do that same paradigm you're talking about. And I just like, dude, she's done eating. She wants to go play. Like, let her. She didn't have to finish her dinner. You know, she's not starving. She's not wasting away. Around the adolescent years too, that's usually when you're starting to discover boys, right?
Yeah, totally. The interest definitely sparks.
And the girls don't know what they're doing, the boys don't know what they're doing, and then we put them in classrooms together and all shit hits the fan, right?
Oh, yes. It gets a little bit crazy
Yeah, but
because there's
that's
hormones flying on both sides.
yeah, yeah, but that's got to go be a huge part of how you start to view your body image, right? Because now you're trying out for cheerleader, and then you're too big to be a cheerleader, and then this person's popular and this person's not popular. Speak to that. Doesn't, I mean, that's got to do a lot with your body image, right?
Absolutely. There gets to be that self-judgment piece that comes in,
Mm-hmm.
where we start to look at the trends,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because depending on what boy we're interested in or how we want to feel, we'll start to notice what they're looking for, what they're looking at,
Mm,
and then create a judgment on ourselves
mm,
based on those trends. Do we
mm,
fit them? And it's all it comes back down to is based on our story, we create a judgment that then we judge how the other person is perceiving us,
mm.
and then create a body image from that point of view.
All right, pretend like there's a mother watching the video right now, and she has a 14-year-old daughter who's going through these stressors right now. How would she take her through a meditation to kind of relieve some of the stress? Like, what is there a mantra you would do? Is it just breathing, or what would you tell her?
Yeah, so there's one of my favorite tools, actually. If you don't mind, I'll share it with you guys.
Please, yeah.
It's called Fact versus Story. And it is a really great way to encourage adolescents to start looking at how they're thinking
Mm-hmm.
and start to notice those patterns so that they can begin to manage them a little bit differently.
Mm.
So I'm going to grab my whiteboard.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm in the
I
midst
love
of,
whiteboards.
I do too. I'm like very old school. Well, as you know.
So we're gonna get Megan drawing for us here. Oh, it's gonna be backwards though. When you do a Facebook Live,
Oh,
it's backwards.
oh man.
That's all right.
Okay.
We'll read backwards. Name.
Oh no, I was doing chants earlier today. Okay, so fact versus story.
Okay.
So we start with a fact. Okay, so everything happens and from the start of a fact.
Okay.
And just for easeful purposes, something happens.
Okay.
So, for example, one of my easiest ways to explain this is a car accident.
Mm.
So two cars crash. That would be something happens.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, we create a physical response. We create an emotional response. And we create a perceptual response.
Perceptual response. Okay.
Yeah. So these are just all automatic. We don't actually have a choice in these.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, like the physical response could be increased heart rate.
Mm-hmm.
The emotional response, maybe we feel angry.
Mm-hmm.
And then the perceptual response is a judgment, immediate judgment.
Like, I'm so stupid. My mom's gonna kill me. Why didn't I pay better attention? Something like
Yeah,
that.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So now each one of these burn off within like 30 seconds, 3 minutes max.
Okay.
And we have the choice then. We have the choice to stop here, or we go into the story.
Form the story.
Yeah. And so what happens then is we create a judgment.
I love that. A judgment is a story is a judgment, huh? I love that.
Yes. And then we go into the need to be right.
Okay.
Okay. And then we move into searching for evidence to support the need to be right.
So you're kind of confirming that story.
Yeah. And so this is actually how we get stuck in our cycle, because it goes around in a circle.
Oh, I love that. Okay.
Okay. So that is how we create conflict, judgment, and really belief system patterns. Because we are doing everything to confirm the story that we create out of that judgment.
And this carries on throughout your whole life, right? And repeats itself.
Absolutely. And so if you have the opportunity to notice, the reason I like to show that is because the more that you are aware of it, then you'll start to notice when kids, adults drop into it. And then you can begin to encourage that they look into a different point of view.
Okay.
So one question that's really easy to ask, especially like adolescents, is where did you decide? Or how did you decide that judgment?
How did you decide that judgment? Let me take it back to an example that I see a lot in my patients and my following, right? An abusive relationship. So can you walk us through that fact versus story cycle? Let's say someone is 22 years old, 23 years old, and she falls in love with the man of her dreams. I mean, he just got a brand new tattoo, Trans Am, his cigarettes are rolled up on his sleeve, looking all cool, right?
Oh yeah, going back to the 50s, man.
And so she falls for him, but then one day they've had too much to drink and he gets physically abusive with her. Walk me through that fact versus story. What would be an example of something that happens that creates that cycle?
Yeah, absolutely. So really, really common, actually. And I love that example. I actually went through that myself. So I'll bring up my whiteboard again. So something happens. So there's the physical abuse, right? So
or verbal.
He hits her, or verbal, whatever it might be. So then automatically she would stimulate these three responses: the physical reaction, the emotional reaction, and the perceptual. Then
so the
physical could stop here.
Physical would be like her heart, her adrenaline's rushing, she's trying to defend herself. Emotional, she might be scared, she might be surprised, astonished, he's never done this before. And then what's the last one again? Perceptual?
The perceptual.
So
that's where there's that automatic reaction to a belief.
Okay, what would she, in that case, what's an example she might perceive?
It could be that, like, he's bad, he's scary, whatever kind of initial reaction comes out of it. I know when I was in that, it was just fear, instant fear. And so there was the judgment around, I'm not safe here.
Okay.
So then what happens in this point is when this burns off, we have the opportunity to choose. And usually this is where logical choice happens. And this is where we actually have a greater opportunity to tap into all of our mental capacities. So we have the opportunity to make that very logical choice. But often what happens is we drop into the story right away and we get into the judgment. So the judgment would be, for example, in that situation, about her worth. So, oh, well, I deserved it. this is the first time that he's ever done this. He'll never do it again. Right? So she creates this story depending on what she wants and what her pasture-based experiences are. Okay, so all of this comes from that age of 4 to 8 years old. These are all stimulated from that point.
Okay.
Depending on what her background was. And if you don't mind, I can use myself as an example.
Please.
Going through this.
Yeah, super powerful.
Yeah, so because I had gone through that myself in my like teens, abusive relationship, verbal, physical. And when this kind of stuff would happen, the judgment I would go back to was, I'm not wanted and I'm not good enough.
Wow.
So I created that judgment about myself. And then I would have that need to be right and support that story within myself. So I would look at and like listen to what he was saying and make it my truth.
You made it your
truth. And then I would search for evidence.
So search for evidence, like other areas of your life where you were not worthy or not good enough at sports, not pretty enough, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. And then that would keep me in this cycle. And that would keep me living in that same pattern.
That's super powerful. So then how do we use meditation and yoga to break that pattern, whether it's an adult or a teenager?
One of the most powerful aspects of meditation is most people think it's quieting your mind, but it's not. It's allowing yourself to be still enough to listen to the thoughts that are coming up. And from that space, when you actually can hear what you're telling yourself, what your thought processes are, you can then get curious with them. Is this my truth? Where did I decide this?
I love that question.
So
is this my truth?
Back down to, and the most powerful aspect that we can remember is that we are always in choice. Everything in our life, we are choosing. We're constantly making decisions on whether we support ourselves or whether we don't. It's just depending on how conscious that choice is. And that's where meditation and yoga is really beneficial, because it slows everything down, allows us to actually hear what we're saying and make that conscious choice based on curiosity.
Well, I think that's super powerful. I'm going to stop you right there because you just blew my mind. And I'm reading a lot of the comments here, and everyone just saying how profound your teaching just was right there. And awesome. I think we've given them enough during this Luncheon Lurn I'm sure they're going to beg for you to come back next week, right? Are you available next week, next Tuesday, to continue this discussion? That'll be absolutely amazing. Yeah. So, Meagan, if somebody wanted to follow you, what's the best way for them to follow you, Meagan?
On Facebook. So my Facebook page is Meagan Fettes, the Joy Coach. Or my website, which is meaganfettes.com.
That's awesome. And I have your name there in the description too, so they get their spelling right. That's amazing. Well, you've just really blown my mind. I don't know what to tell you, girl. That rarely happens. Awesome.
What I love. I've decided my initials now stand for mindfucker.
Mindfucker. Not motherfucker. That's awesome. That's awesome. You're so funny. All right, I'm going to let you go, and I'll wrap up with the people on the live feed, and I'll see you next week.
Okay, sounds great. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye now.
Bye.
Wow. Was that a treat or what? I didn't know where we were going with that conversation. And she just totally blew my mind. Give her some hearts right now if she just blew your mind. You know, that whole teaching about fact versus story, you have a fact, an event, something happens, and then you have 3 responses. Physical response, your heart starts beating real fast. Emotional response, you feel like you're not, you're scared or whatever. And then a perceptual response, where you're like, oh, this is his first time. He would never do this again. He didn't mean to hurt me. And then there's a pause. There's a line. Did you guys notice? She drew a line. And there's a pause. And above that line, you have the choice at that moment to stop. To stop. But she said most people drift, mindlessly drift down into the story phase. And the story is where you find a judgment about yourself, and then you create that cycle that we talked about. You start, you have the judgment, and then you start seeking the truth. You know, you start to try to find evidence to confirm your story. It's super powerful. And if you take a moment and think back about your obesity, guys, in your journey, you have to agree with me that she's onto something, right? All of you guys who struggle with your weight, that's fact versus story diagram she drew fits into your obesity story. And if that's the case, then what I would tell you is that it needs to also fit into your weight loss journey, your skinny story. How can we change the stories? How do we get you guys to start changing your stories from a fat story to a skinny story, to a I'm not worth it story to I am worth it, life is short, right? That's why I'm here. That's the point of Luncheon Lurns. If you found a lot of value in today's broadcast, please do me a favor, hit share right now. Otherwise, you're just a dick, because all you have to do is just hit that share button. Just click on it. How hard is that? Who needs to hear this message? Type in their name right now. I know when I get off of this, I am going to tag my entire team and make them watch this broadcast because it was super powerful. You know, we had 50 people watching this broadcast. This should have been shared 50 times, right? At a last point, I will say, she said, is this my truth? Where did this come from? That's right, Karen. Where did this come from? Lolita, absolutely. Fifi, too cool. Where did this come from? Is this really my truth? How do I change it? How do I break free from that story? Super powerful.
Hi, Dr. Vuong here. If you loved that video, I hope you will check out velocity2020.com. I want to meet you in person. This is my big annual conference in Vegas. It's amazing. It's not just about weight loss surgery, but it's about taking your life up to the next level. You're going to meet the best people, the best speakers, the best audience possible. You're going to really take your life up to the next level. 2020 is all about vision, clarity, and focus. We're going to show you how to find your vision, what you really want to do with your life, get crystal clear, clarity, and then find your laser focus to do what you need to do to have the amazing life that you deserve.